Hello and welcome to Sensational Support Podcast Intro Part 2. I hadn't intended to do a Part 2, but when I watched the intro that I had made originally and uploaded, I was like, something's missing. And a few close people around me also agreed, they concurred. Yeah, we didn't say enough about what the purpose of the podcast is, but also why you decided to do it in the way that you're going to be doing it. So, here we are. I am your host, Fiona, and I am going to explain to you now how Sensational Support Podcast kind of came to be. So in my original intro, I talked to you about the world of special educational needs, about the world of SEND, and I broke down all the different services that I have worked in over the years and also the services that we interact with, the services that then become the team around the child and the team around the family that are living with and experiencing special educational needs. So, as I have said, I've worked in early years for 34 years. And when I first started in childcare, we actually didn't have a curriculum. There was no early years foundation stage curriculum. So we were charged with caring for the children. Daycare back then was very much about caring for the children so that their parents could go to work. And there wasn't much initial thought about what the children would be learning whilst they were in the care of nursery officers. So I was not NNEB trained, but I was Pt2 certificate diploma trained. And it was kind of seen to be a less care qualification and a much more educational qualification. With NNEB, you could go into working in hospitals as a nurse and train further as a nurse. But with the Pt2, you were seen very specifically to be going into education and early years education. And that was when the shift happened. It was when the daycare that I was actually working in went over from social care to education. Okay, so one of the things that we had to do as practitioner was really study children so that we could plan for them, we could plan their play for them. But although we were studying and we were very much aware of all the different theories that encompass early childhood studies and early childhood understanding, that wasn't couched in a curriculum style. So it was very organic. It was a very organic play. We had lots of cardboard boxes and blankets out as the activities in the afternoon, and the kids would use that and make it into something, whether it be a bus, whether it be a ship, whether they just used it for hide and seek. But the children were a lot more creative in their play because we as practitioners were much more creative in how we provided what we provided because we didn't have a framework, right? So I came to really understand children because I enjoyed watching their minds ticking and their minds working. However, what that didn't support was identification. When I look back now, I really understand the children that we were working with that in the now would be diagnosed. Mostly, I would say, it would be that children would be diagnosed as autistic because the children that had cerebral palsy or the children that had a syndrome would have been identified before they came into the nursery. Yeah, the nursery was 0 to 5, and we did have young children starting. But what I am saying is differences like cerebral palsy and syndromes and a sensory impairment or a sensory difference, so a visual impairment or a hearing impairment, were obvious. They would have been picked up. But autism was much more unknown and much more obscure. And it's only now that we're really understanding all of the differences and what those differences look like in very, very young children. Okay? All right, so bear with me. Although this podcast is about special educational needs and differences and neurodiversities, what you're going to hear me talking about a lot is the development of the children. And here's why. If you have a child who is autistic, what you're going to see is social communication and their interaction and maybe their speech and language impacted. And what that means is they're going to come to all of the same milestones as other children, but at a later date. So when you're looking at the behavior of a 4, 5, 6-year-old, the thing that you're really seeing is the differences in their social communication and their interaction, that if you could plot it and you could see that actually they're plotting at around about 2 years, but they're 5 and they're 6. But they're achieving, they're understanding things in the same way as a 2-year-old. They're seeing the social world through the eyes of a 2-year-old. Then you would understand that you trying to have a conversation with them as you would with other 5 and 6-year-olds, trying to provide play and activities, you're trying to support their emotional well-being in the same way as you are other 5 and 6-year-olds, and that's not working, that's not having any impact, is because they're functioning at 2 years. So everything that you would be doing for a 2-year-old, all of those emotional supports, all of those supports in understanding the world and being able to interact with the world, you would have to do that as though that child were 2. However, with a good understanding of development, we also know that that is patchy. So they may well be socially delayed and different, but they might be cognitively able. Yeah? So the way that you give them, the way that you present play and learning to them, maybe you're presenting it as you would to a 2-year-old, but the work itself, the play itself, the activity itself should be at their cognitive age level. So in social communication, interaction, possibly language, they're at 2, but cognitively, they're at 4. They're just not able to express to you what they know because they're not speaking. So you're not understanding what they know. So we have to become the detectives. So way back then, we were detectives. And I say we, early years practitioners, 35, 40 years ago, we were detectives because we didn't have a framework. We didn't have the steps of development. We didn't have all of those things that we needed to support our learning. So all of that to explain to you that when I now look at any child, I see their developmental differences first. All I'm looking at is, where are you at? How does your mind work? How can I get you to the next stage in your development, not in the expected development, but in your development? How can I get you there? The diagnoses will help for funding and for any possible specialist provision, so that the best placement is sourced. There is a place for diagnosis, but ultimately what we are looking at in order to support children with differences is, where are they at? What is their development? How can we move them forward? Hence why this podcast will be talking about children's development from young ages, coming up to the age of around about 5, 6. You will hear me breaking down things like communication and interaction, how children socialize, their socialization, their self-help skills, their feeding, their toileting, their dressing themselves, their understanding of the world. What do they understand about their surroundings, their environment, how they interact with their environment? You will hear me talking about SERTS, the social communication and emotional regulation transitional support system. There we go. Always, every time. You will hear me talking about things like the picture exchange communication system, although it's not something we use as much as we used to. You will hear me talking about things like colourful semantics. These are all different strategies that we use to support children. There are more. There will be more. Makaton, the teach system. There will be more that come out. But all of that will be in relation to children's development. Because in order for you, who I'm here to support, in order for you to really fully understand when you should be concerned, when you can identify needs, you need to be able to understand what the ballpark expected developmental achievements, steps, milestones, by any other word, should be. And only then are we then able to say, are we concerned? Do we need to make a referral? That's what this podcast is for. I'm mostly aiming my support for parents and carers, as I have said, but this podcast will also be in support of practitioners, settings, whoever wants to kind of tap in. All right? So, there you go. Sensational Support Podcast. That's what we're about. All right? I hope that's clear. I hope that makes you want to tap in even more. And I will see you soon.